5 weeks might seem like a long time ago, but we started the season of Epiphany with the baptism of Jesus, and the title that I gave that sermon was the Beloved Baptized. And this is the other bookend to the Epiphany season, the Beloved Transformed. So just a reminder of where we are in the church year. The church year begins 4 weeks before Christmas with the season of Advent. And then we've had Advent, or the Christmas season, 12 days. And then this Epiphany season when we mark the light of Christ, the word about Christ going out into the world. And we use the color green, but there are white Sundays that begin and end it. So the baptism of Jesus, that first white Sunday, and today the Transfiguration, the second white Sunday. This is where we are today. This is the last Sunday before Lent begins. So we're in that season. Ash Wednesday is this week. 40 days, not counting Sundays of Lent, Holy Week, and then Easter. We have 7 Sundays for Easter. And we go back around the rest of the years, the season after Pentecost, and we learn about the life of the church. So we are at the second bookend of Epiphany, as we talked about the Beloved. And the language is very similar. If you remember back when Jesus was baptized in the Jordan by John, he heard God's voice come and say to him, "You are my Son, the Beloved. With you I am well pleased." It appears in Mark only Jesus heard that. But now we have, up on the mountaintop, a very similar phrase, same voice from God. "This is my Son, the Beloved. Listen to him." And so this is more directed at the disciples than at Jesus, but the same kind of language. So we're on the topic of the Beloved being transfigured or transformed. So 3 questions came up to me as I was reading this gospel passage for this Sunday. Kind of strange story. We never use the word transfiguration for anything else. And we're not quite sure what it means, so I started just asking general questions. And the first one, what is transfiguration anyway? What exactly is happening here? The Greek word is metamorphosis, which we sometimes use in English too. It just means the change of a form or the character of somebody or something. Transformation would be the typical English word that we would use. And what does it mean? Nobody actually knows the full meaning of it. Lots of different theories on, this means this and that means that, and there's different interpretations of why here and why now and why in this manner. There's a lot of mystery around what exactly is going on and the fullness of its significance. But we can tell because God shows up and we hear God's voice. This is an event that's one of a few special times in the life of Jesus. His birth, his baptism, we have an angel or directly the voice of God coming. This moment, the transfiguration, and then also at his crucifixion and resurrection and ascension. These are kind of highlight moments of his life. So something about this moment, as strange as it is, puts it on at that level of important events in Jesus' life. And really the key thing about it is what we're seeing is Jesus is where God meets humanity. If you have one takeaway, that's really what's going on here. That in Jesus they see the glory of God shining out, and it's made visible to human beings. God's voice speaks to human beings and directs them to Jesus as the one to pay attention to. So what's revealed about Jesus? This was my second question. What do we learn here? What exactly happens that the disciples learn about Jesus in this scene? The mountain is important, the fact that he goes up there. As Sue said, we sometimes have mountaintop moments, and we call them that for a reason. When you get to that altitude, you just feel like you can see more clearly. In the ancient world, they would actually see that as the higher you get, the closer you are to heaven. And so Jesus is elevated and glorified. There's this moment where the light shines out from him, and God's glory is seen in him. He's there with Moses and Elijah, and they're the key figures to represent the law and the prophets. And the fact that Jesus remains after they're gone, because so something here is more important in Jesus than in the law or the prophets, Moses and Elijah. And there's this cloud, and the disciples are afraid, and they don't see things clearly. So there's this kind of mystery that goes along with what's happening to. Jesus is not fully revealed to them. God's not fully revealed to them. So God's voice says, "This is my Son, the Beloved," and they're directed to listen, pay attention to Jesus, and look at him as the one to give their focus to. And then this last little bit, Jesus tells them on the way down the mountain, don't tell anybody about this until after the resurrection. So one of the rare times where Jesus tells them, this is not supposed to be known yet. Something about the resurrection is going to make this moment clear in its fullness, that they'll see once his story is complete how important this story was, and then they can tell. So my last question was, what did this do for the disciples? It's really a story about them in a lot of ways. God's voice speaks to them. So they're overwhelmed, they're afraid, they're in awe of what's going on here. A lot of the artists that paint this picture draw them, falling down on their knees or with their face on the ground, knowing that they're in God's presence. This was something that stuck with them and really impacted them deeply. And if you go and look at 2 Peter, there's this little passage where Peter remembers, I was up there on the mountain, I saw this, I was an eyewitness. And he comes back to that story as a way of saying, I know that Jesus is God's Son. Here's one way that I know it, and here's how that plays out in the rest of life. So it was, I like to think of it as terrifying yet clarifying. They were afraid, and yet it helped them see who Jesus is and what he was there for. It was just something they would be able to come back to later to build up their own faith and to build up the faith of other people when times were more difficult. So I'd like you to think about a time when you were in this position and you had a mountaintop moment. And we use these phrases to talk about something spiritual, some time when you knew you were in God's presence and you felt closer to God than you ever had before. And maybe there were people with you that shared the moment with you. Maybe somebody inspired you. Anybody want to just quickly shout out where you were? Maybe in this room. Yeah, we're Lutherans, you can keep it quiet. Great.
Mike and I were youth leaders. We knew everything about everything. We were 27 years old. We took the kids up to Mackinac Island, and everybody was fighting and scrapping and everything. And we went into this little chapel, a really old chapel. And somebody said, we're here as Christians representing God, and we're fighting with one another. And at that moment, everybody was asking forgiveness. And junior high kids and teenagers can fight. It was amazing.
A little Holy Spirit moment there. Yeah, you can probably all point to some time where you felt like this. I'm in the presence of something really unusual here, and I wish I could stay here. And so I identify with Peter, right? That you want to be in that moment. Peter's like, I'm going to get some wood, Lord. I'm going to build some good dwellings for you. We're going to stay here in this moment. Nobody even bothers to answer Peter. He's just going off on some tangent. But God's voice comes at that moment and says, this is my son, the beloved. Listen to him. So Peter, you can't stay in this moment. I'm sorry. But Jesus is the one to pay attention to. Listen. When he speaks, pay attention to those words. Where he goes, follow. He's going to lead you where we need to go. And this moment that we want to stay in, this mountaintop moment, is actually about Jesus. And wherever he goes, if we're with him, we're with God. So when they come down the mountain and they're listening to Jesus and following him, the next scene after this one is a scene a lot like what came before. There's this crowd, and people need to be healed, and everybody's pulling on Jesus. Oh, where were you? We need you. And there's this guy, we tried to heal him, but we couldn't. And so he starts again with being sucked into ministry again. Back into the same ordinariness of life, problems and human needs and disciples not getting it. Same things that he had before. And yet, Peter and James and John, having been on a mountain, they can look at things differently. And in the middle of these crazy human situations, they can know this is God's Son. This is the one God's voice told us. Listen to him. So they watch him showing God's love in ordinary human life. And I have to think it transformed so that this event that was a mountaintop moment for them, even though they couldn't stay there, would travel with them. And they would know, even in ordinary times, that same God is there in Christ, meeting human needs, traveling with his followers. And soaking that in, living that way, the disciples become transformed too. They change as people over time. This word transformed is actually a really unusual word in the Bible. It only appears in 2 of the Gospels. 3 tell this transfiguration story. Only 2 use this word. Only 2 other times in the Old New Testament does the word transform appear. It's times when it's talking about us as Jesus' followers being transformed. So one is in Romans. Paul says, do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your minds, so you may discern the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. I think this connects to our baptism, that in Christ, we become part of this story. And we look at the world differently. And we don't see ourselves as the world sees us, but we see ourselves as beloved children of God, sent out into the world to be messengers of this one glorious God who is always with us. And then in 2 Corinthians, Paul writes again, all of us with unveiled faces, seeing the glory of the Lord as though reflected in a mirror, are being transformed into the same image from one degree of glory to another. For this comes the Lord, the Spirit. And what he means is, as Christians, we never see totally clearly in this life. And yet, we get a glimpse of what God looks like. And we can see Jesus risen and alive and at work through us, through the church, to meet the needs of human beings, to let the gospel be known, to make the world a little more as God would have it be. And so we're transformed over time by being part of this. We become a little closer to the work of the Spirit within us, to the image of Christ that we're called to follow. One more time, I'll give you a Martin Luther quote, and this is one of my favorites from him. It talks about our life as a work in progress. Luther says, this life is not righteousness, but growth in righteousness. Not health, but healing. Not being, but becoming. Not rest, but exercise. We are not yet what we shall be, but we're growing toward it. The process is not yet finished, but it is going on. This is not the end, but it is the road. All does not yet gleam in glory, but all is being purified. So we're works in progress. We are people on God's path. We've had that experience of God in our lives, and then sent back out into the ordinariness of human life. God goes with us. And when we serve, it's God serving through us. And we know that we come closer and closer to God as we go through life. So think about your mountaintop moment. This is one of mine. This is the worship center at Trinity Seminary in Columbus. And went through and had a tour there, and then my first worship service there came 2 years later as a student. We made the commitment, we made the move, classes were starting up. We gathered in this room, and you can see natural light pours in, and it's wood all around. It's just a beautiful, beautiful room, well designed to show God's glory. The name, they've called it Gloria Dei, the glory of God, this worship center. And then we sang, Here I Am, Lord. So I'm like weeping as this is going on. So mountaintop moments in this room. But that same first year in seminary, one of the things that meant the most to me was seeing how when we leave here, when we go out of the building and we serve. So we served in churches, we served in the community, we served each other, people in the seminary community. And I'm going to draw one picture of the kind of service that we did through Lutheran social services, learning that this group in the Cleveland area, we call it Lutheran Metro Ministries. This is not some outside organization that we support. This is the church. They are a branch of the ELCA, and it shows the church active and alive in the parts of the world where help is needed the most. And the same God who comes to us in those mountaintop moments where our hearts soar and we feel like this is where I want to be forever. When we go out into the world full of problems and difficulties and needs, the same God is there. And the same God works through us and leads us to be a part of God's presence in that place. So that's one of my moments. What's one of yours? What's a mountaintop moment for you? And maybe we go through life kind of wishing, if it could be like that again. And, kind of depressed or discouraged by the ordinariness of life. But I would leave you with the Transfiguration story as a story where the beloved is transformed. That means Jesus. It also means you and me. That when we hear the story and we know that our mountaintop moments are just occasions where we see a little more clearly the God who's always with us, the Christ who we follow. It can be a meaningful moment any time in life. Wednesday starts Lent, and this being a process, work in progress, God working through us. we'll kind of highlight that on our Lenten journey this year. Our theme that I've chosen for sermons in the Lenten season is a journey of the heart. You may have noticed that Ash Wednesday is also Valentine's Day. And so in addition to when you come and get the cross in ashes on your forehead on Wednesday night, you'll go with a little reminder that the cross is the sign of God's love. And I hope all through Lent, this little reminder will stick with you and show you how loved you are and how God has marked you, called you, and given you some mountaintop moments. And also give you ordinary moments where you can bring those memories, bring that power and that glory, and know that God is with you. God is with you to be one who can make a difference. May you know that you are loved. May you know that in this transformation story, Jesus shows love for us and for the world. And may you be transformed, little by little, day by day, toward the image of Christ, who loves you and who works through you.